A new Siena College poll finds only a third of voters say they would re-elect Governor Kathy Hochul, and her favorability rating is just 39%. So it should be no surprise that she's been trying to boost her reputation lately. We have two examples. She hosts a feel-good question and answer show, and she has a plan to simply send New Yorkers money. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Morja Wealth Management, serving the North Country for 3 generations. MorjaWM.com. Securities offered through Hightower Securities, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC. Hightower is an SEC-registered investment advisor.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Tuesday, December 10th. First up, the 9-day search for a missing hiker near Allen Mountain in the Adirondacks has shifted towards a recovery effort. Jamison Martin is a ranger who helped lead the search for 22-year-old Leo DeFore. Martin described the harsh winter conditions on Allen as deadly.
If you stop moving, if you don't have the gear to the puffy suits, whatever, to get into, like, your body's going to shut down in a matter of hours, no matter how fit you are. You just can't survive it.
According to the DEC, about 60 rangers covered nearly 400 miles of terrain on and around Allen Mountain. On Sunday, rangers had to rescue a Quebec man who traveled to the area to search on his own for DeFore, but crashed his car on the road to the trailhead.
Highly advise anybody interested in trying to help. The professionals have been at it for a week solid, and we can't find anything. So we ask everybody, it's obviously dangerous up there, to please stay out of the search area.
Rangers say they do plan to keep searching for DeFore when the weather allows it, though efforts will be scaled back and shift more towards a recovery mission. First, the money. Millions of New Yorkers could get checks for $300 to $500 next year. Governor Kathy Hochul announced the idea for an inflation refund on Monday. Emily Russell has the details.
Most things cost more money than they did 5 years ago. High inflation rates have made things like gas, groceries, and other household items more expensive. The one piece of good news is that higher prices have brought in more sales tax revenue for New York State, $3 billion to be exact. So at a press conference on Monday, Governor Kathy Hochul said she wants to give that money back.
This is a one-time $3 billion surplus that I believe should be returned to 8.6 million households across New York.
Here's how it would work. Someone making less than $150,000 a year would get a $300 check. A family or household that makes less than $300,000 would get $500 back. An estimated 163,000 people in the North Country would qualify for the money. Hochul unveiled a few oversized checks on stage to emphasize her proposal.
It's your money, and it should be back in your pockets.
The part of the state hit hardest by inflation is New York City. According to the latest federal data, inflation is at 4% this year in the metro area. That's compared to the national average of 2.6%, which is much closer to what economists want long term. Inflation has been easing up from the national high of more than 8% 2 years ago. And according to a survey published Monday by the New York Federal Reserve, people are more optimistic about their finances than they've been since before the pandemic. Still, everyone at Monday's press conference emphasized the need to help New Yorkers now. Grace Bonilla is the president and CEO of United Way of New York City, which operates food pantries around the area.
Last year, 86% increase in visits to pantries was what our system was dealing with. The 500 pantries that we work with knew firsthand what it meant not to have enough food on the table. And we're talking about working New Yorkers.
It's those working New Yorkers that this program is aimed at. But it's unclear what kind of impact a $300 or $500 check could have. A study on the $1,200 stimulus checks paid out during the pandemic found that most people either saved the money or used it to pay down debt. At Monday's event, Governor Hochul said she hoped the money would be enough to encourage working-class New Yorkers to stay in the state.
About our healthcare workers, our bus drivers, our conductors, the laborers, the restaurant, hotel workers, the first responders, the teachers. We all depend on them. And I want them to be able to stay here. I don't want people to leave because they can't afford to live in this great state where they started. That would be a travesty.
New York has lost hundreds of thousands of people to outmigration in recent years, a trend many critics blame in part on the high cost of living. The inflation refund proposal needs enough support from New York state lawmakers to make it into next year's budget. Hochul said it's one of the many ideas she plans to introduce during her State of the State address next month. Emily Russell, North Country Public Radio.
Once a month, Governor Kathy Hochul answers questions directly from her constituents. The New York Public News Network's John Campbell reports on the ones she isn't answering.
Back in May, the governor's office launched a new series on its YouTube page. It's called Ask the Gov.
Well, we asked you to submit your questions to me, and we got literally 600 submissions. So in order to answer them all, let's get started. I'm real excited.
In the video, she's sitting at a table in her office on 3rd Avenue. She's talking straight to the camera and answering things like,
Big question from 4-year-old Everett from Delmar. Is it your job to paint the lines on the road? Great question, Everett.
That got me thinking, what other questions did the governor get? You know, the ones she didn't answer. So I filed an open records request and asked my colleagues to read some of them.
How are you going to pay for your grandiose plans?
Why are you oblivious to crime?
You said you wanted to close
city?
5 prisons.
Which ones would they be? Medicaid funding? Why don't you get rid of Albany?
Why can't you
Bragg?
fix the potholes?
What if Trump wins the election?
They weren't all that direct or angry, but a lot of them were. And it was basically a window into voters' minds right in the middle of a presidential election. They touched on things like affordability.
Why do our taxes keep increasing? We've lived in this house for 50 years.
Immigration.
What is the plan to stop the busloads of migrants coming into the city?
And crime.
Have you lost your mind? Put bail back on the table.
That question from the 4-year-old about painting lines on the road, it wasn't on the list of questions submitted through the governor's website, the list I got through the open records request. The governor's office said staff members asked around after they didn't get questions from young people early on. The very first question the governor answered was on the list. Sort of.
We heard from Palmer H. in Syracuse, who's wondering something's on the minds of so many New Yorkers. How are we going to deal with the affordability crisis and build more housing and have more protections for tenants upstate?
That was the gist of the question Palmer H. submitted, but the governor's office made a key change. Palmer actually asked about a specific type of tenant protection called good cause eviction, which aims to stop landlords from evicting tenants without a specific reason. Landlords tend to hate it. And the governor never mentioned good cause eviction by name. Not when she read the question, not when she answered it.
And we have tenant protections that every community can adopt. It's up to them, but they're in place, as well as incentives for developers to build more upstate, not just in New York City, which is where
It's a thorny political topic for the governor, whose campaign gets a lot of money from real estate interests. I wondered what the person who wrote the question thought of the governor's edit. Hi, Palmer. How are you?
I'm good. What's up?
That's Palmer Harvey. She's an Onondaga County legislator and a tenant activist from Syracuse. Did you submit that question?
It sounds like me. It was 6 months ago, yeah.
Palmer didn't know the governor answered her question, so I had her watch the video. I noticed in the video, they took out the words good cause eviction.
Yeah, that's not surprising.
At the time, the governor and state lawmakers had just passed a housing package that included some good cause eviction protections, but they weren't as strong as tenant activists wanted. And they only apply to New York City. Upstate cities, like Syracuse, have to opt in.
To me, it's more of like a giveaway to the landlords, even though the landlords don't think it's a giveaway to them at all, you know?
Palmer says she gets why Governor Hochul's office changed up her question. The governor was never a fan of the original good cause eviction bill, and activists like Palmer spent years pressing her on it.
Let's be honest, you know? So this is not our first rodeo. We've been trying to get that since 2019 in the state, right?
As for who paints the lines on the road, well, the governor told 4-year-old Everett she's got people for that.
Maybe someday you're going to want to become part of our state workforce, and you can be the one who helps paint the lines. But we have...
You can submit your questions to Governor Hochul at ny.gov/askthegov. In Albany, I'm John Campbell for the New York Public News Network.
We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by Christopher Watts of Canton and Michael Hart and Ramon Vasquez of Malone. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.